Awesome. Welcome, everyone. This is our 15th episode of the Spiky Signal Show, where I sit down with some of the most exceptional revenue leaders in the revenue space. This podcast is really meant for all of us to explore the biggest problems facing customer teams, sharing the real challenges of sales and what revenue leaders deal with every day, whether it's pipeline visibility to coaching to deal velocity. We share it all here and we cover them on the podcast. I'm your host, Waleed Shaarani, head of revenue over at Spiky.ai, and today I'm here with Paula Grunfeld, CRO and Managing Director at Bunny Creative. Today we're talking about predicting churn and risk before it hits the forecast. Paula, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Waleed, for having me here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paula, why don't you just give us a quick elevator pitch on who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, my name is Paula Grunfeld, and I am CRO and Managing Director of Bunny Creative, as you well presented myself. And I have a very strong background in sales and building revenue teams, leading multicultural and global teams across different and various industries, from media to HR, SaaS, and I'm also specialized in scaling high growth companies.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, it seems like you have a lot of, experience with different types of businesses, and I'm really curious to get your take kind of on the media side of things because I don't have really much exposure on that side. My background has always been in SaaS and tech, and yeah, I'd be interested to hear kind of like what you've done at Bunny Studio, but kind of like around the topic that we chose today, which is kind of like predicting churn before, it hitting the forecast. So I guess like I'll start at a very high level with, just kind of like an introductory question is, when you're thinking about kind of like the forecast itself, is there a specific metric that you're looking at when it comes to churn to make sure that you incorporate it back into or bake it back into the forecast so that you have an accurate number when you go to the board or leadership?
Yeah, sure. I do have. I think that every CRO must enforce a single and unified view of the revenue, but should include a risk-adjusted forecast. So how do I do that? I quantified different pools of clients according to the revenue to the renewal probability, and I add the risk factor so that I can have, for example, pool A, 95% of renewal, 60% probability for pool B, and let's say 20% probability of renewal to pool C. And then I perform a forecast contemplating these different risks for the next year.
Got it. That's really interesting, and it's an interesting formula. I guess when you're looking at that formula, what's kind of helping you pull in this data? Is it different tools that you're leveraging? Is it more of the team members or your direct reports that are helping you get this data? How does that look like?
I do have a framework of risk built up based on different risk factors that my team perform. So basically, they are the ones that execute the risk and raise the flag according to different risks that we might be anticipating. For example, if let's say the champion is leaving the company, so this is a risk factor that we need to anticipate. Then, for example, if one of the team members foresee that the volume is decreasing, then that has a different metric for risk, and that all unified, it contemplates the risk formula that I'm taking for the coming period to my forecast.
Got it. And then just kind of like, this is kind of going a little bit in a separate direction, but I'm just curious to hear your take on this. Do you think churn is more often a product problem, a value problem, execution problem? Like, why oftentimes are people churning? I'd love to kind of get your take, because I know a lot of the times it also depends on the type of business. For example, at Twilio, when I was working there, and I was primarily working on their SMS product, a lot of the times people were just, that product was very pricing focused. And so a lot of customers were cost sensitive. And anytime since the SMS product was basically the price would go up if our carriers were charging more, and then that would hit the customer, and oftentimes they'd be like, okay, I'm going to go to now a different provider for SMS, API, for example. So that is kind of like a model that's just basically COGS driven, price driven. But for maybe a SaaS model, that's more kind of value approach, or maybe even product problem approach. So I guess like when it comes to Bunny Creative, where do you think churn is more often a problem?
Well, for us, as we focus on B2B, I think it's predominantly a value problem, but driven by an execution problem. So if the service or product does not integrate smoothly with the client operation, that will be the execution failure. So they stop perceiving the promised value. So even though the product or the service is reliable, right? What I mean is, in my experience in Bunny Creative, what we do is, if we remove the hassle and the execution is seamless and fast, then the client is less likely to question the price or the value.
Got it.
So
So it's more
combination.
really, yeah. And then transparency with communication is like an important thing, I guess. Yeah, it's something similar I've seen at
Totally.
Twilio as well. We had like a whole communication team. Like if a price change is happening, let them know right away, and then have the person that's dealing with that account, the account manager or whoever, be able to address any concerns for them as soon as possible. So, yeah, I totally see that. When it comes to kind of like understanding if the account is slipping, are there any tools that you use to understand like sentiment with these customers, or like I know like a lot of companies they'll use recording tools to just kind of like go back into recordings and see how the customer feels. Like since you guys are B2B, I'm assuming that a lot of the times you're hopping on a call with a customer either like through a video conferencing tool or whatever, and are basically talking to them through there. Are you measuring that output through like a form, or is it through the conversations that the customers and the account managers are having? What does that look like?
Totally. Yeah, we are constantly tracking and identifying that sentiment, and we are tracking them in the CRM within a form. So we remember that at the beginning I mentioned about the risk framework. This is built based on the conversations and all the indicators that we can get from those conversations that we have, and usually it's remote and virtual conversations. So we use tools like Spiky, for example, that can help you understand what's going on with the client and also track it at the same time.
Awesome. Makes sense. And when you're, I guess like should, how big is your team? If you don't mind me asking.
Currently, I have an 11 people team,
Okay. So of those 11 people, the direct reports, are they at VP level, director level? What does that look like?
head of
Oh, head
our
of. Okay.
heads. Yeah.
Um, do with like an 11-person team, it's pretty easy for a CRO to be able to tap into kind of like, their sales team, the revenue team overall. You have a good kind of lay of the land. I guess like as you scale up, like as a for a big enterprise company that has like 100 plus sales team, it's really hard for a CRO to tap into them and be able to understand insights and what's going wrong, what's going right. When you're Do you have like monthly or weekly setups with your team to understand kind of like the lay of the land, their accounts and things like that, or is it directly being reported from your head of?
Um, you mentioned something that it's true. Whenever the team is large, it's difficult to manage and to be on the details. But still, with an 11 people, if you only have one direction feedback from the head, you might be missing stuff, right? So it's still important to have checkpoints with the team, not every week, of course, because that's impossible to handle. But yes, to have regular contact with the team. And also, I do jump on a lot of client meetings as well, because it's different to have the sense of being at the forefront and really experiencing and having the understanding rather than having feedback from one person. So I think it's very important. And the larger picture you get and the more details and if you use tools to speed up that process and to give you visibility, the best results you can get. And of course, the best you can anticipate any churn or mitigate any risk that you can identify.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's take a step back on kind of the less data heavy topic and talk more about kind of leadership and culture here. How do you encourage, I guess, like the CSMs or AEs to raise a red flag without fearing blame? Like, we don't want them to think it's their fault that a customer is churning, right? Is there anything that you do as like a leader to kind of like negate that and help them be very upfront that, hey, this customer is going to churn. Here are the reasons why. So that way, the forecast is accurate in terms of, churn risk.
Yeah, sure. I think this it's fundamental about the culture, and as a leaders, we have to like shift the traditional script that we have on blaming, let's say. So we need to have like a culture of proactive ownership and continue improvement so that the team has also the trust to raise the flag, right? So the first thing it's not why did we get to that point? It's like shifting the question to thank you for raising this. What I don't know what process gap this account exposed to, what needs to be fixed, and that type of questions that tend them to look for solutions and to be more proactive on what they are identifying rather than blame or cause some other sensation that would prevent them from bringing this up in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so when that does end up happening, you have that kind of transparency or trust within the team. When do you escalate churn risk to a CEO or the board? And how do you frame that? Are you basically looking at, like, let's say a smaller account is going to churn, it may not make sense to bring it up to the CEO or their board. It's not impactful. But like maybe a larger account is coming up and they're churning out and it's impacting revenue or top of line. I guess, how are you escalating that to CEO and how do you frame it?
I can think about two situations where I usually escalate this to the CEO. One is when the mitigation plan requires some particular resource or policy or some particular changes that needs their approval, authorization, or their involvement. And then, as you mentioned, when the impact on revenue is really relevant. So they need to be aware that this might happen. And so these are the two situations where I involve them and I bring this topic to them.
Got it. Okay. And then in terms of like importance, is there a specific metric that you look at too? Like maybe, revenue is not the end all be all. Maybe this is an account that is going to be an expansion opportunity that you originally forecasted for the next quarter or for the next year, or they have inroads to partners that would really open up the floodgates for revenue. What, I guess, like characteristic allows you to understand that, hey, this is a very important account and we need to kind of save it and I'm going to escalate this to the CEO?
Yeah, a very important account is not, as you were mentioning, the revenue only, right? Because revenue today is not yet perhaps the potential of that account, and it's more about the revenue of the future. So I care more and I understand more about the potential that the accounts have, the partnerships that we can make, the logo itself. So those are the, let's say, the looking forward opportunities rather than the current status. Sometimes if an account represents 10% of the revenue, of course, it's it's clear that it's relevant, right? But there are other accounts that are relevant or that having them churned before we can fully expand them are also a high risk and high impact for future, and also for reference and referrals. We do a lot of word of mouth, so it's actually not good to have one company that perhaps within the industry has a strong presence and has a bad experience of working with us and moves to a competitor or moves out of us, right? That's not not good publicity for our company. So it's also relevant for me to bring this up.
Yeah, makes sense. And remind me again, Bunny Creative, is it selling a product or a service?
It's selling a product through a service, let's say.
Okay.
We produce creative, so we sell creative production. Basically, we execute briefs. So we help companies to scale with the production. So we help agencies scale creative production for their clients and also enterprise clients to get that production. But the service that we offer is becoming an extension of their in-house teams or becoming an extension of the agency. So it's really relevant, the service, because it's to remove the hassle from all this creative production. So, and the final products are the deliverables of the creative, right? The video assets, audio ads, video ads, that's kind of the final product, but the service itself is the differentiator and where we work the most.
Got it. And do you guys deal with like support tickets or product feedback or anything like that?
Support tickets right now, no. We do on Bunny Studio, which is the platform for creative services. So it's a sister company, and it's I've been working in the past leading CRO of Bunny Studio. Now I'm managing, directing Bunny Creative, which is the service unit for creative production. But with Bunny Studio, we did have a support tickets. And we are constantly measuring feedback. We have like kind of CSAT for projects. And feedback and tickets, and we are all the time monitoring the activity there and gathering feedback from everywhere, right?
Got it. So that's interesting because I've been talking to a couple of other kind of like CSOs actually in the space, and I've been curious to get your take on this. But with Bunny Studio, have you seen signals from support tickets or product feedback that correlate strongly with churn? Like, is it customers that are giving more support tickets or product feedback? Do they end up churning more often, or is that not the case?
I don't think it's related with that, or I don't recall an experience of having um, more support tickets related with churn, because to me, having higher volume of support tickets means that they are using and it's a high adoption of the product, if we are talking about the product, or that they are heavily using whatever you are offering. So I don't think it's totally related. Of course, if you have a client that is constantly complaining about technical issues, if you're talking about SaaS or anything related to your product, you need to address that. If you don't address those complaints or those support needs, of course, it will end up in churning, because at some point, if you don't respond to that, it could lead to a churn. But if we talk specifically about volume, I think that volume of tickets is more related with high usage, and particular cases with recurrence on tech support matters or complaints could lead to churn, of course.
Got it. Yeah, so kind of like what you're saying, I think it just depends on how you end up resolving those tickets. I mean, support tickets, a large volume of that means that there's good usage, but if you're able to resolve those tickets, a large percentage of those tickets in a well mannered, good communication timeline type of thing, then that probably would increase the CSAT score, right? Because now the customer's happy, was able to get resolved in a matter of, short time frame, and so now they're back to using the product again. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. You've been in both worlds, like the service side and the product side, and leading commercialization from those aspects. Does churn and kind of customer success or account management vary widely in those two worlds, or is it kind of the same?
I think that for account management and building relationship with clients, it's always the same and always needed. Perhaps as offering different type of products versus offering services, it varies on the frequency, on how you measure the activity, on different aspects. But at the end of the day, if we talk about account management or account executives or the aim of growing an account, it's always building relationships, being forward looking and establishing that connection with the client. I found more challenging on the SaaS side rather than the service because they use, in Bunny Studio's case, they use the platform, and for them, the fulfillment is through the technology. So reaching the person behind the use of the platform is sometimes harder because they just want to what they need and use, and that's it, and it's difficult to reach that the person behind. Whenever you are on the service, even though technology can be in between, you are constantly connecting with people, so you are building that relationship on through the service. I found those aspects kind of different, but at the end of the day, for us and for me, it's always building relationship with people, even though technology is in the middle, right? It's
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah, no, you did. No, you did. I think that makes a lot of sense. Relationships is kind of like the glue between everything, to be honest. I find that very relevant in not just, customer success, but also sales. Like if you don't build up a relationship with the prospect, and you're just constantly selling to them, and you're not really involved kind of with their challenges or pain points or even sometimes their personal lives. I found it that if you get really on a personal level with a prospect and you kind of become friends at one point, it's very easy to just kind of like, go through that sales process with them. And I think it's the same thing as like, with customers. As the account manager deals with, a customer, relationship is going to be that number one thing that you needed to develop as like a muscle. And so that way, anything that comes their way, whether it's a support ticket or a product feedback or some challenge that the customer is facing, it's like you're talking to a friend. Hey, we're facing this, like, how can you help us? And they'll give you a little bit even more leeway if they're very personable with you, right? If it's someone that they don't barely know, they may be like, hey, who's this guy? He's not even like advocating for me. He's not doing anything. This is going to make me churn type of thing, right? So
yeah,
totally get
of
the
course.
relationship.
Of course, it's not the same when you're dealing with thousands of users through
Yeah.
SaaS, right? So that's
Yeah.
difficult. But if we are talking at an enterprise level, there's always that person, that meaning your champion or the decision maker, and that is the relationship that I mean that it's good to be nurturing, aside of solving the support tickets for the users and on all the activity that happens within the SaaS. But the person behind the decision maker, the champion, that is key to prevent churn. I think that number one of the reasons it's related to that.
Yeah, totally, 100%. I think, yeah, when it comes to SaaS, especially ones that are more focused on PLG growth, product-led growth, where it's just, hey, this is the product, and even B2C, like that's even far more removed in terms of relationships. You're not even
Yeah,
interacting with
of
the
course.
business, and if you interact with them, it's probably like a customer support agent through a chatbot or something. So at that point, you really need to make sure that those agents are very quick with resolving the issue and that your product is up to speed and up to date. Because if you're having way too many bugs come in, you can lose a large percentage of your customers just because of the model that you guys have. It's B2C. You guys need to be on top of it, right? So yeah, I totally
True.
get what you're saying. Um, what's I'll leave you with this kind of like one question, last question. What's the number one habit revenue leaders need to develop to spot risk earlier?
What's the number one habit?
Yeah.
Mm,
And it can be anything. It can be like more data driven. It can be more like listen to your customers more. Like what do they need to do to spot risk earlier?
Um, I think that there are two important things or two important habits to incorporate. One is asking your team about the client rather than what we are doing for them, what we are doing with them,
Mm,
asking about what's going on the client side, what's what's happening in their business, what not only related with us, right? Um, what's happening on their side, what's happening with the champions, what's happening with the meetings that we're having, what's happening with the volume, like constant questioning about what's going on the client side. Those are those habits will bring us information on these risk identifiers that I mentioned before, right? If we are talking with our team and bringing those topics, they need to go and ask what's going on or identify those risks, and then we can mitigate them on time. And the other habit is tracking, making this quantifiable so that we can like develop a framework, develop a process so that we can react on time, prevent, and define a mitigation strategy for each of these risks so that everyone knows and can incorporate this as a habit. This for sure will prevent churn. Otherwise, we find out whenever the client is the contract is up. So yeah,
yeah.
I think that those two will questions and tracking.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Well, for the next episode, who do you know that would be a great revenue leader to bring on here? I always ask my guests that. So if you don't have anyone on top of the head, no worries. You can just email me.
I'll email you after. I'll
Okay.
think of it.
Cool. Cool. Sounds good.
Thank
Anyways,
you.
well, thank you again for being on the podcast with me, Paula.
Thanks for having me, and I hope you found helpful and useful this Churn conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks.